In this video, we are going to discuss domestic violence and sexual assault and gender, specifically male victims, and how to approach patrons effectively. All of the statistics that are going to be presented in this presentation are from the New Hampshire Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, which is the statewide coalition. So these are all unique to New Hampshire. These are the adult statistics. For domestic violence, we have 603 male victims, 340 male victims of sexual violence, and 93 male victims of stalking. I have included the female victim statistics in here as well, just because I think it's nice to highlight the total number of victims, and this is unique for the year of 2014 to 2015. So this is not the total number of victims that we have in our state. This is just for that 1 year of victims who receive services either through the coalition, a police station, a hospital, or any other place that they retrieve data from. The child statistics for 2014 to 2015 include 124 male victims of child abuse, 150 male victims of child sexual assault, and 38 adult survivors of child sexual assault. As I mentioned, those are just the statistics for 1 year. So in the report of violence against men in New Hampshire, they quote that the estimated number of men who have been sexually assaulted could fill the Verizon Wireless Arena more than twice. For those who aren't familiar, it has gone through a name change. It's now called the SNU Arena. And this is a photo of a hockey game that was there, and it really highlights the capacity that is there. It gives you a unfortunately grim visual of how many male victims we have in our state. And this is a large population that we don't talk about often, and so that's why I think it's really important to highlight how many there are and how widespread this issue is, and it's an issue that we don't talk about enough. Male victims tend to have unique experiences with domestic violence and sexual assault, so I've included some information about that as well. Men are less likely to report intimate partner violence or domestic violence and seek services for a number of factors. There is a stigma attached to being a male victim, and there's a perceived failure to conform to the macho stereotype, the fear of not being believed, the denial of victim status, which again goes with this idea of masculinity and what that means in our society, and the lack of support from society, family members, and friends. And because of this lack of support, libraries are a great place for people to turn to gain information and to find other people who are like them. And those people may not be physical people, they may be in the books and materials and events that we provide for them. So this is why it's really important that we include materials for male victims. According to the National Center for Victims of Crime, men experience many of the same psychological reactions to violence as women, and they include guilt, shame, and humiliation, anger and anxiety, depression, and withdrawal from relationships. In regards to sexual assault, male victims face unique hurdles in reporting the crime. They may believe hospital, police, or crisis center professionals will be insensitive to their experience because they are men. And part of this is because as a culture we have created these resources and geared them towards women, because women were statistically the ones who are experiencing this the most. And I hesitate to say statistically because there was a lack of reporting from men. So this might not be a true statistic, but these crisis centers and these programs that have come out for violence against women were in response to a lack of resources for women, and now we're kind of shifting into this era where there's a lack of resources for male victims and trying to combat that. Male survivors of sexual assault often blame themselves for the attack, similar to women, in the sense that they feel that they should have been strong enough or that a real man could have avoided the situation, which again plays into this idea that we've created in our culture about what masculinity is and what a real man is. And male rape victims suffer a similar fear that female rape victims face, which is that people will believe the myth that they enjoyed the rape due to arousal, and this is not unique to men. Women experience it as well, where they feel that because they were aroused in some way, shape, or form, that they must have consented. And arousal is this involuntary bodily function that just happens, and it's not connected to the experience in which it's happening. It's not something that our brain is, cross-wired, and so we're finding it enjoyable. It's just an involuntary bodily function, and male victims sometimes see this as meaning that they must have given consent. Before I move on to the last slide, I do want to highlight that throughout this study, they use the terms male and female, and that this is not very gender inclusive. So that is one area where I would really like to see the statistics get kind of vamped up and be more inclusive to gender nonconforming or the trans community and intersex individuals as well, because those are more unique populations where they might also feel very marginalized by the hyper focus on female victims, and now there's kind of becoming this hyper focus on male victims, as there should, because there aren't services that are meeting their needs, but we're also not meeting the needs of gender nonconforming, trans, or intersex individuals. And so I would like to see this study be a little bit more revamped and be more inclusive. With that said, I have some questions for you to think about in regards to your job as a professional in the library or information services field. So, does your collection have materials for male victims? And if it does, are they up-to-date materials? If not, why haven't you gotten up-to-date materials? Is there space constrictions, budget constrictions? Is there, a fundamental reason why they can't be there, or is it just something that was not thought of and now you have the opportunity to change? Do you provide information for male victims on resources that are available to them that explicitly state they are serviced? So by this, I mean if you have flyers for a crisis center, if you have flyers for SANE nurses, if you have flyers for the domestic violence part of your local police station, does it explicitly state that male victims are serviced? Because there is, once again, this ideology that female victims are the only people who are allowed in those services, and that is not true at all. They do service male victims. They want to encourage more male victims to take advantage of the services that are offered, so that we can help kind of, combat this issue that's becoming more and more widespread. So if you don't have those flyers, consider making some, and consider making them explicitly state who they service. You could even reach out to your local crisis center and ask them to make you a unique flyer that highlights all of the different populations that they service and specifically what they do for them. Could you provide information about male victim statistics in your library? Do you have a bulletin board? Do you have a place where you could post the New Hampshire Male Victim Survey? Do you have a place where you can post those statistics without being triggering to anyone else in the library, with respecting the fact that maybe your library has, a children's area, and, that might not be the best place for it, but is there a place in your library where you can just kind of showcase that there are other people like them, not only in the world, but in our state, so that we can kind of help break down these barriers of isolation that these male victims often feel? And can you create a display that highlights the parts of your collections that are geared towards them for your patrons? Can you do a display about male victims? Can you do a display about the resources that are available in our state, maybe with some backup of some really great biographies that you have in your collection, so that victims can get an idea of what other victims have gone through and kind of, feel a little bit more comfortable in their experience and start the process of recovery? So these are just some things to think about in regards to domestic violence, sexual assault, and gender, specifically male victims. And there are some other tabs on this page for you to check out for resources for yourself to gain some more understanding, and some resources that you may want to add to your collection, or resources to just know about so that you can recommend them to a patron.